In this video, I'm going to talk about one of the polymers of life, and that is carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are made up of three different elements: carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And really, there's a really specific ratio of carbon to hydrogen to oxygen that carbohydrates all have. So if you look on the screen, the three different molecules that you see there are just made up of carbons, hydrogens, and oxygens. And all three of those are carbs. The function of carbohydrates is that they're your first source of energy. If you have ever heard of distance running, people who do endurance races like the marathon or ultramarathon races tend to do something called carbo loading before the race. Carbo loading is meant to get as many carbs stored throughout your muscles and throughout your body as possible, so that when it comes to race day, your body is able to use those stored carbs for energy to get you through that long race. A lot of the times when you are feeling tired, you tend to crave carbohydrates in the form of sugars and refined starches. That's because your body is able to break those items down really quickly and really easily to get the energy from them. Fruits and vegetables also contain carbohydrates. The monomer of a carbohydrate is called a monosaccharide, and that looks like a really scary term, but if we break it down, the prefix mono means one. And the rest of that word, the saccharide part, means sugar. So a monosaccharide means one sugar, or you might have heard it as a simple sugar. One of the most common simple sugars that you might have heard of is glucose. Glucose is really your body's favorite source of energy. Now, if we were to put two monosaccharides together, we would form a molecule called a disaccharide. Di means two, and saccharide means sugar. So if we put two sugars together, we would get a disaccharide. If we were to put three or more monosaccharides together, we would make something called a polysaccharide. Poly means many, saccharide means sugar, so a polysaccharide is made up of many sugars. On the screen, you can see the glucose as your monosaccharide. Sucrose, which is made up of two monomers or two monosaccharides, is a disaccharide. And if we put three or more monosaccharides together, we make something called a polysaccharide. In this case, we are looking at a piece of a molecule of starch. Some examples of carbohydrates, there are really three major examples, and then like the food examples that you would normally think of is going to contain one of these. The first example is starch. Starch is what is found in a lot of vegetables and grains. This is a form of a carbohydrate that's found in plants, and it helps to store energy in those plants. Okay, so whenever you're eating a plant-based food like vegetables and fruits and grains, the carbs that you're getting from it are from starch. You're eating that plant's stored energy. Glycogen is how animals store energy. So when you carbo load before a big race, the stored energy in your body is in the form of glycogen. And then during the race, your body breaks that glycogen down to release that energy when it needs it. The last example of carbohydrates is cellulose. Cellulose is found again in plant cells, but has a different function from starch. Cellulose protects and stiffens the plant cells. So it's a very strong, rigid carb. Whenever you are eating a plant, like especially any types of leaves like lettuce, a lot of that food is just cellulose. Cellulose is not something that we can digest. So really, when you eat something like iceberg lettuce, you can't really digest a majority of that food. So therefore, you end up just pooping it out. We cannot break down cellulose. It is just too rigid. However, that's why a lot of people push those dark green leaves. Like instead of iceberg lettuce, which is kind of white, we want to look at the kales and the spinach that's really dark green, because yes, you still can't break down that cellulose, but the darker green that it is, the more nutrients that is present in those leaves that your body can extract. So instead of eating iceberg lettuce, that really you're just going to poop out and you don't really get anything from it, you could eat spinach. And yes, it's going to fuel your poop, but it's also going to give you some nutrients. So, I mean, either way, you're going to poop, but wouldn't you rather get nutrients instead of just poop? Makes the most sense, right? And on that note, that's it for carbs.